Hello and welcome to another Kangaroo English Daily Digest. My name is Christian and today I am in the beautiful city of Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. Actually, the city is over here. I am on the 42nd floor of the Robertson building in the city, and as you can see, it's an absolutely spectacular view. The city itself is just enormous, massive, beyond comprehension. And there's some really interesting buildings here in the background. I'm going to talk a little bit about those in a minute. But first, I want to say that tomorrow, unfortunately, I'm leaving Kuala Lumpur and I'm heading to London. And I'm leaving the city grudgingly, which means I have feeling of this feeling which is grudge. Now, we talked a little bit about sound symbolism in a previous Daily Digest about how certain sounds are related to certain feelings, right? And so let's think about this kind of like this grudge sound, as grrr. Grrr. I mean, instantly you know that that's a feeling of kind of being unhappy, right? Grrr. Like in cartoons, when the characters don't speak any language and they make only sounds, they're kind of like, when they're angry, they're like grrr, grrr, grrr. And this is probably where this word grudge came from. It came from that sound symbolism. Like other words like groan and grizzle and to be grouchy, all of those, like grumble, all of those kind of words are about kind of being unhappy. So if I'm grudgingly leaving the city, it means that I'm leaving the city unwillingly, against my will. I'm leaving the city reluctantly. And if you're doing something reluctantly and unwillingly, it means you're unhappy. And that's where we also get the noun to have a grudge. You might also see it being used as an adjective. You know, if two boxers have a fight and they've had a long rivalry for the past, 10 years, and you could say it's a grudge match. One which is built on feelings of kind of unhappiness, kind of grrr kind of feelings. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Malaysian skyline. So here you can see this is the Sky Tower. This is actually, I think, the tallest freestanding monument in the world. Now, it's a monument. It's very different from a skyscraper. Monument actually comes from the old root men, which means to think, to use your brain, like mental memory, and that's exactly what monument means. A monument is to create memories. Now, this is a very sort of specific type of monument, but obviously monuments normally are maybe for fallen soldiers or heroes or maybe other important kind of scientists or people who've done important things in history. But this is just a monument maybe to man's ability to create very tall structures. And here we have, these are called the Petronas Towers, or maybe the Petronas Towers. And they're the tallest twin towers in the world. For a while they were the tallest buildings in the world. And here's something interesting. So one of them was built by a Korean company and one of them was built by a Japanese company. And if you Google the story of the Petronas Towers, then you'll discover that one of the towers, the tower built by the Japanese company, has a slight tilt, a slight lean, okay? And it's not straight, right? But this is actually not true. This is a rumor that got out of hand. This is a vicious rumor. It's urban legend, okay? And so this is an example of a non-fiction website producing fiction, producing something from the imagination, okay? And I want to talk a little bit about the difference between fiction and non-fiction, because there's some really interesting research about the difference between the people who read a lot of non-fiction in general in their lives and people who read a lot of fiction. Rooftop jacuzzi. So the research tells us that people who read a lot of fiction, they develop a really strong sense of empathy. So let's talk about why. So when you're reading a fiction book, you're reading about characters which are not real, about situations which are not real. You have to use your imagination to create that story in your mind. And that simple act of creating that story in your mind, of using that imagination, actually gives you a much greater ability to also understand what it's like to be in the shoes of another person, to feel what other people are feeling. And you can demonstrate this effect in the laboratory. So you can start with a very basic experiment. You can walk into a room and with your handful of pencils, and you can drop them on the floor. And in general, the people who rush over to help you pick up those pencils, they're going to be people who read more fiction, because they're people who understand, they can empathize with that feeling of dropping all the pencils and the frustration and the anger. Another thing is, you can show people who read more fiction photographs of just eyes showing different emotions like surprise or anger or fear. And people who read fiction are much better at actually detecting the emotions of those people. And it tells us something really interesting about how important it is to read, because obviously empathy is an important skill for life. We all need to be more empathetic to understand other people's situations. So, something to think about. If you like reading a lot of autobiographies or a lot of self-help books or a lot of books about history, maybe it's time to try reading something different. Maybe, I don't know, maybe a story about a man, an English teacher in the big city, and he gets kidnapped by ninjas, and then he has to be rescued by the FBI. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's Daily Digest. I'm going to go out and eat some food. I'll see you in class.